I survived my birth mother's D&E abortion that aborted my twin next to me, and I've always wondered what my twin actually experienced.
They would feel everything as far as being pulled apart.
Can you each share briefly how many abortions that you were involved with and the kinds of abortion procedures that you performed?
It's hard to know because I never counted, but I went through it with one of the residents who did the same clinic I did, and we figured out I probably did 500. I not only did first trimester abortions, but I went outside my program to learn how to do dismemberment abortions.
What were the ages of the dismemberment abortions that you did, the ages of the children?
I think they might have gone up as high as 24 weeks, but I'm not really sure. I know they were good-sized babies, and as awful as it sounds, it was sort of like the technical challenge, and the bigger the better. It's hard to say that now, but that was the truth.
What was it like for you to do those abortions?
I was so focused on helping the woman. Even as I counted the body parts, I did not see them as human. I didn't see them as people. It was just the procedure, the woman on the table. That was my focus, helping her. And I somehow was able to totally black out that child. I tried so hard to make this really painful procedure less painful for my patient. I never even considered what that baby was feeling. And we now know that they feel pain. And I just can't imagine the excruciating pain that they suffered at my hand.
Between June of 1980 and February of 1985, in private practice, I performed just under 1,200 abortions. About 10% of them, or 124 of them, were second trimester D&E dismemberment abortions.
And the rest, were they first trimester abortions?
Yes.
Did either of you ever know anyone or get involved with yourself with saline abortions?
I did saline abortions during my training as a resident. If patients were late 70s, technology was different. If patients were 13 weeks from last menstrual period or less, we did the suction DNCs in the delivery room of all places. And if they were more than 13 weeks, we'd make them wait till they're about 16 or 17 weeks and then bring them back for saline abortion procedures.
What was it like when you were doing saline abortions? Can you describe what the experience was and what happened during those abortions?
The procedure is to, in amniocentesis, put a needle into the uterus, into the amniotic sac, draw as much of the amniotic fluid out as possible, and then substitute 20% salt solution. These women had to go through labor. I mean, the salt solution would burn the babies, and when they died, it would release prostaglandins and initiated labor. So these women had to go through labor. It was anywhere from, I saw them run anywhere between 8 and 36 hours between the time we did the saline injections and the babies were delivered. I never had a live birth with that procedure, although it was possible. It's just a horrific procedure, especially for patients, going through the abortion at all and then being through in labor that long. And that was why when D&E abortions were developed in the early 80s, my partner and I jumped on the bandwagon because we saw it as a far better procedure than the saline.
What did the babies look like after a saline abortion, and what were usually the ages of the babies?
They were 16 weeks and up, typically up to around, as I recall, maybe 21 or 22 weeks. We could do them later, but that in my hospital needed special approval, so we didn't get very many of those. The babies were intact, they were dead, but you could see where the skin was macerated or burned from the chemicals.
Claire and Melissa, you both have survived abortion attempts. Can you start, Melissa, first by sharing your story about the abortion attempt that you survived?
Yeah, as we're talking about saline abortions, that's who I am. So my medical records reflected my birth mother was between 18 and 20 weeks pregnant when a saline infusion abortion was forced upon her against her will, bypassing hospital regulations at that time. But through my medical records, we now know that she was probably more like 31 weeks when that abortion was performed. I soaked in that toxic salt solution. My birth mother experienced that over a 5-day period. And the belief, of course, was that it would successfully end my life. But the fear then became that she was going to lose hers in it because it was taking so long. So on the 5th day of the abortion procedure, I was finally expelled from the womb, delivered at St. Luke's Hospital in Sioux City, Iowa, not because they were intending for me to be born alive and they would provide me medical care, but simply because that's where that late-term abortion was being performed. And the day that I now celebrate as my birthday is the day that I was accidentally born alive. And I think that's one of those things that people in our world take for granted, that it is a privilege for people to have a birthday. It shouldn't be. But what's the difference between the three of you and Claire and I? Why is it the day that we were accidentally born?
Claire, what kind of abortion procedure did you survive?
My birth mother was taken to have an abortion at 20 weeks, and she had a dismemberment, D&E abortion, and she was told that it was successful, that she could go home and go back to her normal life, but she went home and realized that things weren't right, and she was home for about 4 weeks, went back to the doctor, and they told her that she had been leaking amniotic fluid and that her abortion had been successful on one baby, but that I had survived her D&E abortion. And I was born just a few weeks later. I was born 10 weeks premature. I weighed 3 pounds. I had a dislocated hip and I had club feet. And she had a dry birth, and so she was told that those complications were due to that and due to the abortion.
Claire, what is it like hearing Dr. Altman and Dr. Levatino, both of them having been involved with D&E abortions? What is that like hearing about that?
It's hard. I mean, it's hard for me to hear that the humanity of my twin was not recognized as you pieced babies' bodies back together. Because I know, like you said, at 20 weeks, that my twin must have felt something. And I mean, it makes me wonder. I've always wanted to ask a former abortionist, like, what would my birth mother have experienced during her abortion that successfully aborted my twin? Because she said it was incredibly painful and incredibly hard.
A lot of pain. It's, there's no anesthesia unless you're under general. There's no real anesthesia to the body of the uterus, just the cervix. And you're going in and out and pushing and pulling, and they're cramping, and it's very painful.
Yeah, a little different in my experience. We would do suction DNCs up to 10 weeks in the office, but beyond that, we would be in a hospital. That was at the time. I know that's not the way it's usually done now. I think it's insane not having a patient be in a proper environment because complications can occur with D&E abortions. So my patients were anesthetized doing D&E abortions, and they would not have gone through that. On the other hand, I always tell my medical students a story about doing a D&E, and this is why I know these are done in freestanding clinics, and I personally can't picture it. I had the experience of doing an 18-week D&E, and you're using the instruments to pull out arms and legs, but instead of arms and legs, I got the lady's intestines in my clamp. The uterus had been perforated, the intestine got grabbed and pulled all the way through the uterus to the outside. But I've got my patient, and this is why we did it in a hospital as a safety measure. This patient is in a sterile environment, anesthetized, get a surgeon, fix the bowel, complete the abortion, and she did okay. So I can't even picture doing it outside of a hospital environment personally.
We were in an office doing those. I never had any of those complications, but when I was on call later, after stopping abortions, we had a woman come into the emergency room with her bowel hanging from her vagina. They were concerned that she wouldn't live.
Did either of you ever have an incomplete abortion, to your knowledge?
Yes. Certainly in my training I did. I'm trying to think of all the abortions I did once I was an attending. I have to imagine I had a handful, but not very many if I did, because I was getting very good at it at that point. But definitely, certainly in my training I did.
What happened in that training experience with the incomplete abortion?
In the particular one I'm thinking of, I had done a suction DNC on a patient, and everything seemed to be fine. And a day or two later, I got a call from the chairman of the department telling me that this woman was sitting home watching TV when she literally dropped out of her baby's arm on the couch or something, and obviously had a pretty severe reaction to that. And we brought her in and completed the abortion.
Melissa, you endured a saline abortion. Dr. Levatino, early on in his practice, was involved with saline abortions. Do you have any questions for Dr. Levatino?
One of the commentaries I hear often from survivors and women that we serve at the Abortion Survivors Network is that they aren't provided a proper exam. And I know in my birth mother's experience, that's what she experienced as well. The abortionist did not provide an adequate exam to know how far along she truly was. So I'm curious, Dr. Levatino, what your feedback to my abortionist would be.
I'm listening to your abortion story about your mom was projected to be, what, 18 or 19 weeks pregnant, and she was actually 31. And this is a medical term that is not complimentary. What kind of barber doesn't know the difference between a 19-week and a 31-week pregnancy? I can't even imagine that. And again, I teach medical students, and I try to impress on them several things. First, they are not agents of the state. The other thing, too, is that it is incredibly important to understand exactly what the gestational age of your patient is before you start an abortion procedure. And again, we weren't running a freestanding abortion clinic. This was my office. And it's different in that case. If you want to have your baby, that's great. If you want to have an abortion, that's fine. We knew that it was so important never to be caught in a situation where you had a gestational age that you didn't know for sure. We did ultrasounds on every single one of our abortion patients. And we had an ultrasound machine in the office. We did not charge them for those ultrasounds. That was part of our evaluation, make sure we never got in that situation. And it troubles me now when I hear about, this is a little more far afield, but I've got to say it. I mean, I hear now about medical abortion or chemical abortion being done with internet websites where your contact with the patient is limited to either a video chat or text. How in the name of anyone can you determine gestational age by just talking to somebody? She'll give you her last menstrual period if she knows it. But you cannot adequately determine gestational age on video chat. You cannot tell if a patient may be carrying an ectopic pregnancy on a video chat. This is dangerous, and this is being promoted.
If you would have been my abortionist and you knew that my birth mom was 31 weeks instead of 18 to 20, what would you have done?
We're going to have a delivery. We did D&E abortions up to 24 weeks. If she was 31 weeks pregnant, I'd say, ma'am, it turns out you're actually 31 weeks pregnant, and we're going to see you for your prenatal care. And then we would talk to her in terms of, now, if you don't wish to raise a child, we can help you with adopting that child. This is what I say, this is the difference between working in an abortion clinic and an office. But we would have taken care of her for the remainder of her pregnancy if she wished to retain us as her physicians, delivered her child, and then went on from there.
Basically, you would have been talking about an induction or a partial birth abortion, which they weren't doing at those times, DNX. It's funny, even when I was actively doing abortions, when I heard about the DNX procedure, I thought, why aren't they arrested for murder? You know, it was beyond my comprehension. Even though I totally believed in abortion and did them myself, I could not understand why they were not arrested for that procedure.
If I treated a dog the way I treated unborn fetuses and embryos in abortions, that would be animal abuse.
Can you imagine the outcry if people heard that puppies were being ripped limb from limb with no anesthesia? People wouldn't condone it, they'd be outraged.
You shared a little bit, Dr. Altman, but what would you be doing to the dog that would be illegal that you could have done or you did do to the...
Dismemberment, as she said, literally tearing off arms and legs.
Well, the embryo or the fetus is alive.
Absolutely. That's what a D&E abortion is.
Both of you always completed the procedures. It sounds like you had one incomplete, but it wasn't a born alive situation. Was there an aspect of abortion that you felt you were especially good at or competent at while you were practicing as abortionists?
I thought it was better than most of my colleagues. I felt I could do it as painlessly as possible. None of the others went on to learn how to do D&Es. It's funny, though, how God finds the dark places of your soul. The one thing that I continued to be proud about, even after I became pro-life, was that once in the clinic, woman was supposed to be 12 weeks. She actually was 16. Because I had the D&E training, I was able to complete her abortion because at the time, it was very stressful because she was bleeding. I thought she was going to bleed to death, and so I was really thankful that I was able to complete the abortion. I later met a survivor who related her story right before I was going to relate my story, and it turns out that her mother went in for D&C with suction at 16 weeks, which I cannot understand why the doctor even attempted it. He told the mother her head was too big, he couldn't complete the abortion to go home and she'd miscarry. Well, she never miscarried, and Jennifer was born. And I looked at Jennifer after she finished speaking, and I said, Jennifer, I'm so thankful I was not your mother's abortionist because I could have finished the procedure and you would not be here. And that was the first time I thought, maybe this good thing that I thought I did was really a bad thing, and maybe that baby would have lived.
Melissa or Claire, do either of you have any questions for Dr. Altman or Dr. Levatino, or anything that you'd like to say to them?
I survived my birth mother's D&E abortion that aborted my twin next to me, and I've always wondered what my twin actually experienced and what maybe I experienced in the womb next to my twin. Could you describe maybe what both of us would have experienced?
A lot depends on the anesthesia that your mother was given. Again, in a procedure that I would have done, it was under a light general anesthetic. That anesthetic will eventually anesthetize a fetus in the womb. It takes about 8 or 9 minutes for those anesthetics to circulate into the uterus. Before then, they would feel everything as far as being pulled apart. I know I'm no expert on fetal pain. I've done amniocentesis, just amniocentesis for diagnostic procedures. You're putting a needle into the amniotic sac where the baby is. And you can hit the baby with a needle. You can't see them. And you can feel them pull away. And we're talking 16 and 17 weeks. So anyone who sits there and tells you that these fetuses can't feel pain, I don't believe that for a minute. So they would feel the pain of being dismembered until and unless that anesthesia kicked in. If they're even using the kind of anesthesia that would do that.
And in our case, there was no anesthesia, just a paracervical block, which just blocks the pain in the cervix, but the baby would not have been anesthetized at all. But again, it depends what your mother had. If she was feeling the pain, the baby was feeling the pain. It's so hard to be with abortion survivors, knowing that, I was a perpetrator, I'm the evil one. I'm just thankful for your forgiveness, which you've both given me. I'm sorry, sorry for all of us. But it's also very healing, you know. I'm just thankful that God, you know, ran after me and grabbed me out of that situation and allows me now to try to save babies instead of killing them.
From what I know, my abortionist didn't practice anymore after I survived.
Interesting. Sounds like that person needed to find another career anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Clearly wasn't very good at what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about my abortionist and even my grandmother was a nurse, right? She was either helping to deliver babies or now I know at least one abortion, and I would suspect there were more. But when I think about the final days of his life, I've always wondered if he ever thought of me. And I don't know that you can answer that.
I can only speak for myself. Yeah, I think about them. I lost my daughter before her 6th birthday. My brother Mark was my closest friend in the world. He died of cancer 12 years ago. And I believe, certainly I want to believe, but I do believe that when my time comes, the two of them are going to be there. I'll know it's time because they're going to be there. I believe that. But it scares the hell out of me that maybe those 1,200 kids are going to be there too.
I would think he would have to think about you. I think about the babies that I aborted, and they didn't survive. I think the fact that he stopped practicing after you were born, that he must have thought about you.
Are there any other questions or anything else that either of you would like to say or either of you would like to say to one another?
It amazes me that our, people in government even can get up and say that there are no abortion survivors. That we don't need laws to protect them. And we heard people like Jill and you, and we know that abortion survivors are there, and we know that they're being left to just die or actively killed, and that there've got to be protections.
Well, and for me, when they dismiss us and marginalize us and try to shame us and silence us, I always like to remind people they're silencing and shaming the women, our birth mothers and mothers who are going through it. And they're doing the same to clinic workers, abortionists, healthcare workers. And so in the grand scheme of things, all of us are so much more alike in that respect. We have an abortion experience, and it's inconvenient to the narrative when it comes to abortion. And I think that's one of those things that brings all of us together as we know the truth. And we see one another's humanity. I look at you, Dr. Altman, and I don't ever think, oh, that's the former abortionist. I think, oh, there's Dr. Altman.
I think about Dr. Nathanson and how, he was instrumental in Roe v. Wade being passed. But as soon as he had his conversion and saw the baby in the womb on ultrasound and realized, what he was doing and changed his mind, then he was some crazy person who didn't know what he was talking about. Totally discounted.
Yeah, thank y'all very much for being willing to admit what you've done and allow it to be used to expose the truth and to protect women like our birth mothers. We really do appreciate that. I know it can't be easy.
And I got to say this too, women need to know that the whole thing is a big lie, that abortion is not the answer. We don't need abortion to succeed, and it is not health care. So much of abortion is a huge lie, and we're telling the truth about it.
Thank you all for being willing to sit here and share your stories.
Lila, thank you for bringing us all together and for for hosting this forum so that we could meet and speak and tell the truth.
Takes a lot of courage and vulnerability. Thank you.